Hi, today we are going to talk about Math plus Yellow, and we're going to cover Unit 3, which covers fractions, multiplication, and division. Many of you have skipped Unit 2, which is perfectly fine. Unit 2 was on geometry, and we will be covering that in Class Connects later in the spring, and it will also be covered in Study Island later in the spring. What we want fifth graders to do at the beginning of the year is really get a strong foundation in place value, including decimal place value, multiplication and division, and powers of 10, and then we'll head into fractions and decimals. But geometry is something we can address later on. And if you look at the content weights, this is last year's content weights for the CRCT. We have third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade. This year we are having the Georgia milestones, so things could vary a little bit, but you can see that numbers and operations is 55% of the content weight. This is all of those things dealing with place value, multiplication, division, fractions, and decimals. All of that comes in that category, so you can see it's more than half of what the students need to learn. And then geometry is a little bit smaller portion of what is required for fifth grade, and there's not going to be as many questions on that, but this is the key foundational skill so that we can lead into middle school and have success with algebra. So, as you can see, this unit has 14 lessons. The extended problem solving is one of the most critical lessons in the entire unit because it combines everything you learned and summarizes it into one lesson. These lessons are difficult. The extended problem solving gets students to really explain their thinking and reason with math, and that may be something they haven't done in the past. Sometimes students thought of math as I'm going to work this out and just get the answer, but math is much more than that. Math can make sense if we allow students to make sense of the math. So if this activity is hard for your student, do not stress too much about it. Practice makes perfect. The one thing I do want to talk about with this extended problem solving and reasoning is that in Unit 4, you're actually going to submit your answers to the teacher for grading as part of the math portfolio grade. Again, we are just excited that you're taking the time to work out these problems. The Class Connect sessions are also going to help students understand the math and learn how to explain their thinking. So I highly encourage your child to attend the Math Class Connects, even if it's something that you think your child already knows. The explaining their thinking may be something that is a challenge for the students. So let's head over to the lesson guide. Now remember, when you first open the lesson guide, this side tab is going to be closed, and you can open it up and go straight to the section on fraction, multiplication, and division. Remember also that as you go through the lesson guide, the answers are going to be provided, and they are going to be provided in a pink color. So you can see as I scroll down right here, it gives an explanation and the answers are in pink. Now also right here is the resource section. So I'll go to the fraction unit. There are multiple resources available for this fraction unit. So if it says go to the resource section, this is what it's referring to. There are fraction strips, there are number line printouts. This is also where you're going to find the extended problem solving and the extended problem solving answer key. So definitely rely on this section. So let's head over to the student guide and let's see what is in this fraction unit. Right here we start off with 4/5 times 15. Now again, if your student is struggling with basic fraction concepts, I would highly encourage you to review some fourth grade skills before you jump right in and begin computing with fractions. Learn Zillion is a site that has some great resources for fourth grade and third grade that you can access, and I'm going to show you that in just a bit so that you can review the concept of fractions before you compute with fractions. This is where I would also encourage your child to have their math journal or notebook ready so that they can make models and visualize what this actually means. Right here we have a number line and it says what is 4/5 of 15. We want to think of that multiplication sign as the word of, 4/5 of 15. So I think even an easier way than using a number line to start off would be get 15 pieces of cereal or 15 blocks. divide it into 5 equal groups, because that's what that denominator tells us. We have 5 equal groups. Well, how many would be in 4 of those 5 groups? Now on the number line, we could hop, and we could hop by 3s, because 15 divided by 5 is 3. So we have 1 hop, 2 hops, 3 hops, 4 hops. I would land on 12. So 4 of the 5 groups would be 12. And you could, again, model that with a real hands-on manipulative so that it will make sense for the students. I'm going to head on over to the next activity, and we start using the area model of fraction multiplication. Again, we want students to understand what multiplying by fractions means and not just follow procedures and say, well, 2 times 1 is 2 and 6 times 4 is 24. That's not all there is about multiplying fractions. So let's head on over to use the document camera, and I'll make it full screen. Here's an example. If we have 3/4, we have 1, 2, 3 of the 4 pieces, and we multiply that by 1/2. So I'm going to say I want 3/4 times 1/2, or I want 1/2 of the 3/4. Now I'm going to lay these on top of each other, and I'm going to actually turn this one this way. And you will see that when I have 1/2, here's my 3/4. Remember, I had these 3. When I have 1/2 of those, I have 1, 2, 3 of 8 pieces, or 3/8. You can see that the denominator changed, and it wasn't just because I multiplied 3 times 1 equals 3 and 4 times 2 equals 8. There is actually a meaning behind this. So if a student didn't have these shapes, they could easily say, okay, if I have 3/4, and I'm going to shade those 3/4 in like this, and then I want 1/2. So let's draw a line to show 1/2. And this time I'm going to actually get a highlighter, and I'll do a different color to do 1/2. And this time I'll go this way with my lines to make 1/2. You can see, and I'll get another color here, you can see that this part overlaps. So I have 3 of the 8 pieces. Now let's try it with another model. This time let's do 2/3, and let's do 1/3 of 2/3. So let me write that. I have 2/3 times 1/3. Now you'll notice when we think of multiplication, we sometimes think of making numbers bigger. Because we have 2 times 4, well, we end up with a bigger amount. But when we multiply fractions by a fraction, especially if it's not an improper fraction, we're going to end up with a smaller amount. So let's again lay this on top of this, and we can see where it overlaps. 2/3 times 1/3, here's my 2. And how many pieces do I have in all? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have 2/9. So if a student didn't have models and they needed to draw it on their own, which I encourage them to do in their math journal or on scratch paper, we have 2/3. So let's shade in my 2/3. Now I'm going to draw thirds this way, since I'm multiplying by thirds again, and I want 1/3. Well, where do the pink and the pen marks overlap? Right here in this little section. I have both, and so I have 2 of the 9, or 2/9. So that is how we want to use the area model of multiplication, and we want kids to understand what it means to multiply fractions. And we can talk about, does it get larger, does it get smaller? This is also going to be a lesson on scaling, which is coming up with multiplication and what that actually means. Now you'll also encounter multiplying fractions by whole numbers. So again, I'm going to turn on my document camera, and I'm going to show you 2/3 times 1 and 3/5. So when I have that, I want you to think about when there's a 1, especially just a 1, that means we have 5/5, or 5 of the 5. So I'm going to think about my 1 like this, and I'm going to have my 5 of the 5 plus 3 of the 5. So I have 2/3 times 5 plus 3 is 8/5. So I turned this improper or mixed number, I turned this mixed number, which has a whole number and a fraction, into what we call an improper fraction. An improper fraction has a larger number over a smaller number because we have a whole and part of a whole. So with the area model, it's sometimes easier to convert this mixed number to an improper fraction. And of course, eventually students are going to see the pattern that 2 times 8 is 16 and 3 times 5 is 15, and they'll be able to multiply across, and they'll see that we have a whole because 16 is the same as 15/15 plus 1/15. Again, we have our number 1 here, ugly number 1, but we have equals 1 and 1/15. So we can convert improper fractions to mixed numbers really, really easily. So let's head back over to the OLS and let's go through and see what else we have in store for us. Again, there's lots of different models. I encourage you to use the different models and encourage your child to use these models in their math journal. These are real world problems, and we want students to understand why we would need fractions in the real world. It says Antonio uses 1 3/4 feet of yarn to make each friendship bracelet. How many feet of yarn will Antonio use to make 3 bracelets? Now we want to multiply. We have this 3 times. So again, multiplication is kind of like repeated addition. So we have 1 whole with 3/4, 1 whole with 3/4, and 1 whole and 3/4. So how many fourths do we have in all? Can this number be converted from an improper fraction to a mixed number? Keeping those things in mind and helping your student understand how many wholes there are and combining, because if we have 3/4 and just 1 that's not filled in, we could combine some of these to make another whole. So using that vocabulary and talking with your students is very, very important. This lesson will go into some larger things, such as multiplying mixed numbers times mixed numbers. You are not likely to see questions this advanced on the end of the year assessment, but it is great practice. And again, modeling is what is important. Understanding what it means when you're multiplying is the key to success. Now we're heading into scaling. Multiplication is scaling. What this basically means is when you multiply something by a fraction, is it going to get bigger? Is it going to get smaller? Right here, it says 6 times 3. Well, we know 6 times 3 is 18. But if we have a whole number 6 and we only take 3/4 of the 6, it's going to get smaller. We're going to only take part of the whole. Now, they're trying to trick you here with some really big numbers. You're not going to see fractions this big either. But it says 121/10, which is greater, 121/10 or 121/10 7 times. So of course, if we have 121/10 7 times, that's going to be greater. Here we have another large fraction that you're not likely to see. It says 12/33 times 5/2 times 12/33 times 13/15. What they're wanting you to see is they want you to understand no matter what size or what the digits are or what size the fraction is, they want you to understand 5/2 is bigger than a whole because we have 5/2. So that would be 2.5. So we have this number or this fraction divided by 2.5. So that would be more. That would make this number more. Whereas this one, we're taking part of it. We have only 13 of the 15 pieces, which is not quite a whole. So it's important to understand the difference between an improper fraction, which is a whole plus part of a whole, and a fraction like this where the numerator is less than the denominator. So there are some great LearnZillion videos that put this into perspective. I know this may not make a whole lot of sense, but when you watch those videos, it'll help your student make sense of that concept. Then after you talk about scaling, we are going to go right into fractions as division. And this problem right here, it says a plumber needs to cut a 6-foot long pipe into 10 equal pieces. How long will each piece be? And with your journal, basically they're wanting you to say, okay, I have 6 and I need to divide it by 10. And they want your child to understand that a fraction is a division problem. So this is where we want to simplify though. And this is something they began to learn in 4th grade, but again, you might need to review a lot of these concepts and talk about them continuously. You need to think about the factors of 6 and 10. And when we talk about factors, we're talking about the facts that make up the number 6. So I know that 1 times 6 is 6, and I know that 2 times 3 is 6. So 1 times 6 and 2 times 3. Those are the factors of 6. And when I think about the factors of 10, I know that 1 times 10 is 10 and 2 times 5 is 10. And then I look for anything they have in common. Well, besides number 1, they both have a 2 in common. Both of them can be broken down by 2. So I'm going to divide by 2. Whatever I do to the numerator, I have to do to the denominator, and I get 3/5. So that answer is the simplified form. I haven't changed the size of the fraction, but I have simplified it a bit. Now, with some models, I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. So here are some fifths, and let me get some tenths here too. So if we have 6 tenths, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I get 3/5, you will see that even though the digits have changed or the numbers seem to have changed, the size didn't change. So 3/5 is the same as 6 tenths. So printing off fractions like this are a great thing to do. You can also buy magnetic fractions that you can use on your refrigerator. You can also use virtual manipulatives so that students understand that we're not just changing the number, we're actually showing an equivalent fraction. They're the same. And that terminology is something that you may need to review as you work through this unit. Again, you are going to come across some problems like this one says. It says, which means the same as 2 and 1/4. Well, we know that 4/4 would be 1 whole. There's another 4/4, so that would be another whole. And then we have 1/4 left over. Use those manipulatives, use those fraction strips. Remember, there's lots of resources and printable materials right there in the link. And then you're also going to come across some core focus, which means that you are going to apply some of these situations in real world stories. Right here it says 3/4 of the 24 apples that Carol bought were for baking pies. The rest were for snacks. Again, get a manipulative, get a block, get Cheerios, anything to represent 24. Divide them into fourths. How many is in 3/4? And then you can use those models to continue working this out. Also encourage your child to draw dots on their scratch paper or in their math journal to act out this problem, and encourage them to model their math, because that's what they can do when they take the Georgia milestones. A lot of students never use their scratch paper because they don't know how to use their scratch paper effectively, and this is a great opportunity to help them. Now I'm going to head over to the Learning Coach Guide, because some lessons in this unit are not in, there's not a page for the students to complete, so I want to reiterate here a little bit more about fraction division. You will, in your Learning Coach Guide, have several activities to review. You can see they're all online, but it's important that you help your child understand that fraction division is not just about multiplying and flipping and getting the reciprocal. And I'm going to show you an example of this. Again, fraction B is all online. Fraction lesson C is all online. So I'm going to show you with the webcam again, and I'm going to get a clean sheet of paper. And this time, let's look at what is 1/2 half time or divided by, let's do a division, 1/4. Now, in the past, when we were growing up, they taught us rules like, okay, so when you multiply, you're going to change this, or when you divide, you're going to change the sign and you're going to flip it. So we were taught to just simply say 1/2 times 4/1. But we really didn't understand what we were doing. We just followed the rules. What students need to understand in 5th grade, and they will later make sense of this and be able to know why multiplication is related to division. But let's think about 1/2. And if I divide 1/2 by fourths, how many do I get? I have 2. So the answer is going to be 2 because 2/4 fit in 1/2. Again, we could follow this algorithm where we could say, okay, change the sign, flip it, and we would get 4/2. If we think of fractions as division, we know that 4 divided by 2 is 2. So we get the same answer, but doing it this way actually makes math make sense. So again, when you're teaching the division of fractions, make sure you're not just teaching lists of rules and procedures, that you're actually helping your student understand what dividing a fraction actually means. So let's head over and talk about a few things. One thing that you can use to help with fractions are pattern blocks. You can divide pattern blocks with different things. You can say, okay, this is 1/6. If you do want to add some on here, and then you just click on the corner and you can move them around. So there we have 2 of the 6 because 6 would fit on here. So you could easily multiply. You could add multiple things and say, okay, I have 2 6 2 times. So how many do I have in all? So let me switch this around. And another website that has some great manipulatives actually will let you write on the board as well, but I just want to share a few different sites. So if you go to the last unit 1, you're going to see another site that I mentioned. So we have 4 right here. So let me move these over. We combine them. And you can see how fun it is to just actually play with some of the different manipulatives that way. I also want to share with you the math website. Again, if your child is struggling with skills in fractions, definitely go back to the 3rd and 4th grade pages to review, and there's also lots of resources on the 5th grade page. Fractions really begin mostly in 3rd grade, even though there's some foundational skills taught in 2nd grade, so review those pages. And then I also want to talk to you a little bit about Learn Zillion. In the newsletter, there are codes, so you can type in the code that I give you right here. But if you want to explore other grade levels, I encourage you to create a free account. When you create a free account, you can go to this Common Core Navigator tab right here. And with this Common Core Navigator tab, you can go to any grade level, 2nd through high school, to explore concepts. Fractions are NF, numbers and operations fractions. So when you go to 5th grade, you can then go to this number and operations fractions, and up here it talks about equivalent fractions and adding and subtracting. That's coming next. We're going to do addition and subtraction of fractions later. So you're going to skip on down to this section where we begin multiplying and dividing, and every single one of these folders contains links to videos. I'm going to go right here to some of those scaling videos that I was talking to you about. So this is a great way to, and you can see there's lots of different videos, but it talks about how a number gets larger and smaller. This is how one teacher did it. You can go back and also see how another teacher did it, and she used a flashlight model to show how things grow and expand. So you could click on the second folder, and you're going to get a whole nother set of videos that talks about what multiplication as scaling actually means. These videos are priceless and are going to be great teaching tools for you. Now again, if your child needs some remedial skills in fractions, and I wouldn't even say it's remedial. We need a strong foundation with fractions before we compute with fractions. Definitely go to the 4th grade and 3rd grade tabs and explore some of these fraction lessons as well. We don't want students to jump into something and then be confused. We want them to build a strong foundation. So again, I'm going to go back to the OLS. First unit was numbers, whole numbers and powers. This is where we're going to begin our Class Connect session. So if your student was kind of confused with exponents and how the value of a digit changes from place to place, or the decimal values, come to our Class Connect sessions that start in September right after Labor Day. We are going to cover all of those skills. Our Class Connect sessions are going to skip geometry until the spring. So you can also skip geometry until the spring and come back to that later. And then you can head right into fractions. If you need to review, that is perfectly fine. You will see that there are optional days built into the lesson. So when you come to an optional lesson, make sure you mark it complete and spend more time on the skills that you need to work on, and also reach out to your homeroom teacher so that they can provide additional resources for you as well. I appreciate you taking the time to listen, and reach out to us if you need additional support. Thank you.